but it is allowing myself to say that I have had spirit connections and that I have a guide. But just know that for anybody out there, it is hard to take this journey at first because family, we're just not taught. And so family may not agree with you or believe you.
Hello, family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name's Betty, and today I'm joined by Bernadette. And Bernadette is an intuitive and ancestral healer. She's also an end-of-life doula and owner of Tell Me Our Story. And I am super excited to have you on the podcast today. I got to meet Bernadette at our IANDS conference, our 2024 IANDS conference in Phoenix. And she actually did an intuitive reading on me. And it was so spot on. It left me feeling super elevated and in a deeper space of healing when it comes to my own ancestry and my lineage and my familial line. And I'm super grateful for your service to the collective. I'm so happy to share space with you on the podcast. So I'm going to toss it right over to you. Thanks so much for your willingness to serve.
Betty, I'm so happy to be here and so excited that, the time that we spent at IANDS was just an amazing, amazing experience. And being able to share my story is just so important because one of the things that's important about my story is that I feel like I'm not special. And so I'm a great example for people who are wanting more out of their spiritual life. And wanting to feel those connections, and that I was one of you. That's probably the most important thing. I say that when I look back, I think of myself as a mystical geek, like mystical spiritual geek. I read every book, I watched every, Gaia and ancient civil, all those things. I just kept feeling this calling about there's just more to our existence here. But then I'm also a mom raising kids, and my husband ended up becoming very sick with alcoholism. So I'm really just trying to hold on to life. And it's an incredible struggle, but and I'm feeling like I'm holding on with my fingernails. But I also loved going back to my ancestral. I loved doing ancestry. And it was one of the things that kind of grounded me. It kind of went along with the mystical stuff. And so it was during that time, when he was so sick, I would do ancestry, make trees for other people, for myself, going back and really understanding how those ancestors are part of us. So when David was so sick, I started praying, which is often, people, that's what you do when you're struggling and trauma is going on. And I have a Catholic background. And so I began to use the rosary. I mean, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but it's tactile. And it was something that felt, it's a really good thing to help you with meditation if you have that in your background. And there are lots of bead things out there that you can use, but beads are really good in helping. So I was saying the rosary to kind of settle myself. And this one night I had a visitation. Didn't even really know what a visitation was until I had one. And it was my great aunt came through, and she was a nun, Sister Lou. And we're in this room, and she's holding my hands as tight as she can. And I literally can feel that. And I'm looking around, not wanting to look at her. And she finally makes me look at her eye to eye. And she says to me, "We hear your prayers." And I woke up. And I realized in that moment that I wasn't alone anymore. And so this whole, all the things that I thought about in my whole spiritual, I'm starting to realize, okay, they are over there and they are with me. And it was interesting because when she said, "We hear your prayers," because I had been imagining my ancestors sitting around a table with me. And so when she said "we," I knew she meant that they were all with me. And then about, I don't know, maybe a month later, I had a spiritual experience when I was awake. but it was still using the rosary. And what happened is I started to channel an ancestor came channeled through me. And she started to say, she said the rosary with me in an Irish brogue, which meant that I was saying it in an Irish brogue. And this was, I mean, I'm almost looking at myself thinking like, what is going on? But I knew my heart that it was a great great grandmother or something, an Irish grandmother. And so I was able to go look at my tree and energetically, and this is where the openings were coming. I'm energetically looking at my tree and I knew which ancestor. It was my great grandmother on my mother's side. So that happened. And she said the rosary with me for months and months. So every time I would say the rosary, even when I would try not to say it in a brogue because I thought I was making it up, it would just, as soon as I got into that little bit of meditative state, she would come in. So those were the two biggest things that happened to me that helped me, one, get through my husband's illness. And he passed away in 2017 from alcoholism. So this was a really difficult time, a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos, just, helping myself and my 3 grown children through this process. So, and then after he passed, I think it was because I had more time and I had a little less to worry about in the moment, but I began to open up and explore more spiritual things. And I started going to, other spiritual counselors and things like that. And so my journey opened up to where I have a guide, and that guide came in. I could feel them around, and the ancestors stayed with me. So every time and even now, if I'm helping somebody build a tree or just, my ancestors are there. They come in songs sometimes. They come in all kinds of ways. But it was when my guide came in, I realized that I was moving on to a higher frequency and a higher way of understanding my spirituality. And, it was interesting. I kind of knew that they were around, but I didn't know how to communicate with them. And I had a friend that was really loved using her pendulum. And so I decided to try a pendulum. Never used it before. Bought a pendulum, brought it home, and used it. They said, tell me yes, tell me no. And it told me yes and told me no, and scared the heck out of me. I dropped it and put it away because I was afraid I'm getting into something that's too woo-woo. Who knows who I'm going to be contacting. So what I did was I left it alone for, 24 hours or so. And then I saged it. And I saged the whole house. And then I asked for the highest good. And I started using it. And I said, are you an angel? And they said, no. And I said, are you a guide? And they said, yes. And we began having conversations. In the beginning, it was always with the pendulum because I thought that was the only way I was able to communicate. I didn't believe that I would ever have the ability to spiritually connect. And so I thought I always needed something that was going to help me make that crossover. But as I worked with my guide, they began to teach me. I mean, we would read books together. And, I would be reading a book and I would say, especially sometimes the mystical ones, and I would say, is that really true? And sometimes they would say, yes, it was. And other times they'd say, no, like that's a little bit off. It's not. And we became, they were with me all the time and helping me make these decisions as I was trying to heal. I mean, healing from what I had been through, I'm still in that process. We don't, we grow through grief, we grow through trauma, but, you know, the healing will continue through our whole lives. And I wanted to share just how special it is to have a guide, because I want you to know that they are there for you and that there are ways um, to learn how to speak with a guide and find them and understand. But I wanted to share that after my husband passed, I had a difficult time with one of my siblings, one of my sisters. And it was because there was just so much going on. And, you know, whatever kind of why it happened, I'm not sure, but I was struggling with her and she was struggling with me. And so I was struggling to forgive her because I felt like that she had done some things that were hurtful, you know, shortly after his passing. And so I was working with my guide on forgiveness. And I was reading this, you know, we've been reading a book that, and, you know, there was forgiveness in it. And, you know, we were just talking. So this one evening, as I was sharing space with them, as we were working together kind of on this, they let me know that I had risen to a higher level of forgiveness. And I said, because I forgave David, you know, he had been sick, addiction, alcoholism, it's an illness. And he said, no. And then I said, is it because I forgave my sister? And he said, yes. And I was amazed that he was telling me that he felt that I was rising. And about a half an hour later, my brother called me to tell me that my sister had passed away. And it was an incredible experience because my guide was with me this whole time. And I said, did you share that with me because you wanted me to know I had forgiven her before she passed? And he said, yes. And so it was an amazing, incredible experience in itself. But it is also what I want to share the most is that our spiritual journeys are continuing. And wherever you are in yours, whether you're like right at the beginning or whether you have made it quite a ways, but you're still feeling like you haven't reached that place that you want to reach, that there are ways to keep connecting and keep rising, keep going higher in those frequencies, because that's really what it is. And we're all trying to reach source. We're trying to raise to that, you know, to that level. And we're all doing it together. And when you go, you know, that's why IANDS was so special, to be in the company of this amazing group of people who are all on that journey, and to be able to share it in random conversations with so many people. So that's kind of,
Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, that story about your sister. I didn't hear that at the conference. I did hear the rest of your journey, but that was really super powerful, covered in goosebumps. And, you know, that spiritual lesson of forgiveness, I feel like is so important to all of us. I think that's one of the main missions of the human experience. And, you know, forgiveness can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I really needed to hear personally what you shared today. So thank you so much. And thanks to Spirit for this connection today. I really, really needed to hear that. I'm wondering if you could share, do you feel connected to your sister in spirit? Have you had any kind of after death communication with her or your husband? Can you share some of those stories?
yes. I've had a lot of after death communication with with ancestors, with family, and it comes in all different ways. So my David came right away. Within a couple of weeks, he came to me as a crow. And the crow thing came, I mean, it was incredible. My son had just signed up to have a crow put on his, have a tattoo, and he didn't know that David had come to me as a crow. I mean, so that was just incredible. With Maureen, I think I was a little bit more worried about it because I was feeling that, I knew there was forgiveness, and I knew that, there was this forgiveness feeling going like back and forth, like I could feel that. But the funniest thing was when I knew, and I was kind of asking for help to connect with her, and this was shortly after she had crossed. So wherever she was in her journey of crossing over and settling in, so to speak, because I know that there is kind of a that's what happens. But all of a sudden I had this vision came into my head of the Queen of Hearts. It was the card, the Queen of Hearts. And my sister was the oldest of 8 children, and she was always called the Queen. So I knew as soon as that happened that she was with me. And so that was, so that was and she also, I had this playlist of songs that it seemed to represent, not seem to, absolutely represented a lot of family that had passed. And so when a song like David, I certainly had songs for him, and my brother-in-law had passed away and he had a song. I mean, there were just all these songs. And so I kind of assigned her a song because I just wanted her to know. And so that song would play. And I remember as we were there for her funeral, as they were bringing her into the church, her song played in my head. And she was telling me and so that's what's the really incredible thing is once you begin to open up this conversation, whether it is family or ancestors, they communicate with you in a way that you can understand their language. And that's what I do in helping when I work with people, is to help them know that we all speak a different language. And so for some people, it might be nature. So it might be like seeing a rainbow is the thing that lets them know this loved one was with them. Or seeing the crow, or seeing that, but there's so many, and music is a big one. So for anybody that has music playing in their heads, I can see, and actually I'm just kind of getting this from your parents, this just kind of popped in, that there's music associated with them.
100%. Yes. And, this is something that I'd like for you to expound on a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we have a lot of skeptics that tune in to our podcast. I feel like we have a lot of experiencers and stuff, but just in case there is somebody who's skeptical out there, how do you know that it's your loved one? How do you know that it's an ancestor? How do you know it's not just you making it up?
So that's a great question. That is when you begin to allow yourself. I think that's the work that I did when I was had this curiosity about mysticism, and it is allowing yourself to believe that this is them. And when you do that, like when you acknowledge them and say, okay, I know I just saw 333, or I just saw 111. I know that's a sign from you. And you will suddenly see signs over and over again. So that is really, if it is music, they will, as soon as you acknowledge that that connection is there, then that's a language that they can speak to you in. But they don't, spirit doesn't just choose one way. So if you have, whatever, let's say there is a loved one or an ancestor or somebody that you're connecting with, a guide, they want this conversation to really open up. It's not about, on a special day and you're out and you see the butterfly that just won't leave you alone. it's about learning how to connect every day and know that we're not meant to take this journey without help. And even though we never were taught this growing up, and we don't talk about death, and we don't have those conversations in this culture, that it's important for us to realize that we need to talk about this, that this is part of our journey and part of raising the consciousness of the planet, and helping us all understand. And that's why IANDS is so incredibly important. It's it is just knowledge that's out there, and support and love that you're surrounded with. So it's all of those things.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for all the promotion. IANDS is the best, everybody. Go check us out online.
Yeah, but it's funny because that's coming out of me. Like, that's where, it was coming right out.
It's a true experience. I think, especially when you get to go to our in-person conference. I mean, we have a beautiful online community as well. We have sharing groups. We also have local groups. Like, so if you're somebody who's craving a spiritual community, and that was the question that I was going to ask you, how do you find others to keep you in this elevated space? How do you connect with other spiritual people? Obviously, we're talking about the conference. That's where we connected. But do you have other communities that you know of? Do you have a community of your own?
Well, how it's working is, just from the lowest, like if you're just getting started, it's trying to connect with others around you. And I actually, and this is another shout out, when David was so ill, I went to Al-Anon, and what an incredible spiritual community that turned out to be. And so that is where a lot of my being allowed to speak about spirit and acknowledge that spirit was around me and I was connecting with it. So it's that journey that I want to take. I want to take others on, to help them understand. I have a YouTube channel, so I'm always putting out information about spirit. And in the process of creating, I love your community that you have created, which is an amazing community, a YouTube community, where there's just people who are gathering that want to talk about this. And as someone who is in this spiritual community, any opportunity I see for a spiritual connection, in terms of a group, like if I'm on Facebook, if I'm on Instagram, I'm looking for those connections. And the other interesting thing I'm going to say about this is, when I look for a connection, I want to know that it's right for me. And so I kind of go into it with an open heart, and I allow myself to be drawn in. And I see if there's anything that makes me want to say, okay, I think this is good, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. And so it's important for us to realize that our journeys are so personal, and we need to discover our path in a way that is comfortable for us, and not to always feel that you have to let somebody else lead you. And I think, because if you are true to yourself and you're allowing spirit into you, if you're allowing the divine energy, if you're allowing universal energy, they will lead you. You'll be led. And they will also be the ones that, if you enter into something that doesn't feel quite right, that you feel that sense of, I don't know if I want this group is for me, or if this is for me. So really, and that's one of the things when I work with people, is I try to teach them how to take this journey. There's so many ways to be spiritual. I mean, I just made a list of all the different, it's huge. And I've researched so much because I myself was looking for all these different spiritual communities and trying to figure out which one felt good. So I really encourage people to take that path and allow yourself to open to many different but then know that you'll be shown, you'll feel it. And I can
Yeah.
see you smiling with
Oh
that.
my, because I have done the same thing. I put myself in so many different spaces, especially when I was just coming into spiritual awareness. And I was like, okay, I think this is a cult. I'm pretty sure this isn't for me, and you have to practice discernment. And the only way to practice discernment properly is to hit your head against the wall a couple of times. So I definitely did hit my head against the wall a bunch of times. But then again, like feeling it in that yes space
Yes,
inside of you. Like, is this where I felt my intuition before, where it steered me in the
right.
right direction? Or is
Yeah.
it somewhere, does it feel like it's in the place where, oh yeah, all those really bad things happen? I don't want that. So
Well, and
yeah,
we feel it here. So when your heart center lights up and that you're on the right path. And you may say in the beginning that you don't feel like when they're telling you no, but I guarantee you, the more that you work with spirit and the more that that you will begin to feel the yes and no's. And the yeses will be so strong and so heart-centered that you just feel this overwhelming urge to keep moving forward in that direction.
I
It's
love that.
again like
Yes.
going to the IANDS conference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. And then also knowing when to step away as well, because that happens too. Sometimes things are no longer a fit for us. Just because you connect with something at one point in your life doesn't mean that you have to stay with it for the entirety of your life. Like some spaces are meant for us to grow and evolve in and then detach from. So I think that's something that, yeah, it's just coming to me right now as well. I want
Yeah.
to know if maybe you can share with the people listening, like some real hands-on ways to connect with their guides or their ancestors.
Okay, great. Um, so with the ancestors, sometimes, and this is what really I found in a lot of cases is when you are connecting with your ancestors, when you hear those stories and you begin to realize the things that have been passed down to you because they experience trauma, and science tells us trauma can be passed down to us. When you begin to discover a little bit more about your family and your ancestry, you discover more about you. And it really is, that's how you begin your spiritual, or at least that's the way I began my spiritual opening. For for IANDS, people who have had near-death experiences, that's their way, that door flew open for them. And so they knew immediately. But for somebody who's had many STEs, it was understanding my ancestors. I started to connect with my ancestors as soon as I started looking into their lives and really understanding. Oh, it's just incredible to think about it. How quickly that happened and how quickly that they surrounded me. And when we talk about connecting with a guide, for me, and I think for everybody, again, it can be different. I feel like the ancestors introduced me to my guide. And when my ancestors, I feel most of my ancestors at a level that I would say is here. Some who are more of a guide to me are a little higher. And my spirit guide is higher. And I say that meaning frequency, kind of like by that. And so it was just that knowing it was that I kind of feel like I'm getting information, but I don't really know what it is, and then working to develop a relationship with the guide. And for me, that turned out I started with the pendulum, but for some people it can be using cards, it can be just taking long walks in the woods. Like there's no strong answer. It can be in studying a different religious path, like really like Buddhism or something that really was resonating with you. And whatever it is that begins your journey, if you are open, the guides, and you are looking for guidance. We all need help. When David was so sick, I went to Al-Anon. I needed help. And I needed help on my spiritual journey. So it is, you can definitely do it on your own, but I think it helps all of us if we find those circles and help ourselves understand how others have opened, and then learn to kind of listen and understand when they're connecting with them. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think it's really important for us as people who have this connection to share the tools. And of course, if anybody's interested in connecting with their ancestors and they feel like they can't do it, you can always reach out to Bernadette. That's what she does. And she does it in such a beautiful way. So just to shift gears a little bit, I know that your not living family really loves what you're doing with your life. I'm just kind of curious, what does your family and friends think about what you do and your experiences?
And that is another great question. I feel like, I'm just coming out now, sharing, because not only do I connect with ancestors, sorry, not only do I connect with ancestors, but I connect with spirit as well, and family members. And so sharing this, I think my family was able to understand the ancestral connection, because you can kind of keep it in that little ancestry tree, like they're over there. But it is allowing myself to say that I have had spirit connections and that I have a guide. And they're pretty quiet. I don't get a lot of, I have one sister who is now liking some of the things that I'm doing. So I'm thinking, okay, that's a step forward. But just know that for anybody out there, it is hard to take this journey at first, because we're just not taught. And so family may not agree with you or believe you. But then I have also met people that have amazing families. Like they're like, my grandmother did it and my mother did it. And there's like this line going back. And I love that too. So it just depends on where you fall. I didn't fall in that group.
Yeah, me neither. But I think that another cool thing is that you get to find your spiritual family through all
Right,
of it as well. Like if your blood family is like, okay, she's totally lost it. Then,
right.
and we have podcasts, we get to listen to other experiences, we get to connect with people so that we know that we're not, I'm not losing my mind. If there's hundreds of thousands of other people out there saying the same things that I'm saying, maybe we're just living in different realities.
Exactly. And that's what, if you allowing yourself to understand the mystical world, and that I think that's the greatest gift you can give yourself, to rise out of this 3D level that we're living in. And it takes a little bit of effort to let yourself go and say, I'm going to believe that's true. Actually, I remember reading in a spiritual book somebody had written, and that was one of the things they said, that when they were at that level where they weren't quite sure, they would say, I don't believe yet. And because they hadn't allowed themselves, and that was my journey. The things I read now, I go back and read, and I remember reading it the first time. And the first time I'm like, I don't know if this is really, and now I'm like, yes.
Oh, wow. I love that. That's funny because as you were saying that, I was thinking sometimes I go back and read older books and I'm like more jaded now. I'm like, yeah, we know it. No,
It's
I think that that's amazing though. So I've really loved connecting with you today. Thank you so much for your service to our community. I just want to see if there's anything else that you feel called to share to feel more complete about our time together.
I would just say that, it's all about love. It's all about spirit love. It's just, I think I would say, allow yourself to experience it, feel good about it. And if anybody is kind of pushing at you, just turn and find the group that is where you're able to talk about it, because I think that that will fill your heart and help you continue to grow.
Bernadette, thank you so much again for your service to our community. Super grateful for you and your willingness to come on and share and be vulnerable. And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.